Good morning, everyone. It's great to be alive and land from South Carolina. And good to see all of you here this morning. And I want to introduce some friends of mine from the Brevard congregation. They came down here to spy on me and report back and tell if I'm misbehaving or not. Earl and Ann Rabb, Jim and Alice Hardy. And I mean, there's a whole list of things I could tell you that they have done and are doing up in the Brevard congregation that have really made things happen up there. The list just goes on and on. But they've been very active and still active. Earl is a retired United Methodist minister who saw the light. I know you do.
Too late, but he's still
but they've done a lot, and I just can't, what they've done is immeasurable in terms of helping that church grow up there. The list goes on and on, but I'm glad you all are here. And hopefully the report will be good when you take it back to the authority figures. And Leo, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
All right. Any other visitors here this morning?
I'm Amanda. I'm visiting Tracy and Larry. I first spent with them in St. Augustine, so.
Good to have you, Amanda.
Thank you.
I think we have a few announcements. Gretel, do you have an announcement?
Well, the holiday season is coming, and we have decided this year to partner with Thermal Belt Outreach again at Christmas time. They are doing this a little bit differently. For the churches that want to contribute, it is non-client specific. So what they are asking people to do is buy gift cards. There's 8 different stores that they would like the gift cards to come from in denominations of $25. And then if you would like to buy toys, there's a list of suggested toys, but we do not have a list of names this time, so I think it may be a bit easier. They would like the things delivered to Outreach by the 27th of November. And one possibility, particularly for those who do not live in town, if you have your gift items ready, bring them to the next service, and I'll see that they get taken to Outreach. I have some papers with the information on it. I'll put those over at the table. And if you are interested, please take one. It will let you know what toys they're looking for and what stores for the gift cards.
Yes.
Elisa couldn't be with the congregation this morning. She's still in Auburn, Alabama, supporting her friend who went through a rather significant surgical procedure. But as we've talked over the last 15 days or so, we understand, and it's almost hard to believe, that the end of the year is really coming upon us. And of course, the holiday season, the year-end holiday season is going to be here, and I'm sure everybody is prepared and done their Christmas shopping already and got their trees. But the point is, December, since this is the first Sunday in November, as we look forward to December, we've got 5 Sundays. So we will have a 5th Sunday, and that happens to fall on New Year's Eve. Now, with that in mind, the question arises relative to what the congregation would like to do. Hold a service, don't hold a service, considering family considerations and travel outside of Landrum and Tryon and wherever. So what I'd like to do is at least plant the seed today to start thinking about your personal schedules, your family schedules, if you would be available to attend a 5th Sunday service or not have a Sunday service. And I'd like to ask Don in our email newsletter to start providing the email contacts for the board members, Elisa, myself, and Gretchen, Christine, and see if we can't from the planting of the seed, get a consensus of what we'd like to do for that. It's December 31st is the date of the time,
Okay,
or of the fifth Sunday.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom. We'll do that. Don, we can do that. Sure. So everyone heard that, right? Did everyone hear that? Okay. Yes, Don.
I'm hoping the Brevard crowd is not really a search committee. Having said that, if you'd like, there's some October issues and the most recent November issues of our newsletter by the door here, about 5 of each. Be my guest, be our guest, go ahead and take one with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's light our chalice this morning.
Well, good morning, everybody. We tried to find, meaning my wife and I both worked on it, tried to find a good reading that applied to the topic that Ernie's picked. So how do you find something about scallops and human relationships? Not sure. It's easy to judge, it's more difficult to understand. Understanding requires compassion, patience, and a willingness to believe that good hearts sometimes close poor methods. Through judging, we separate. Through understanding, we grow.
Thank you, Nick. End of sermon. If you woke this morning with a joy that you would like to share, or sorrow so heavy you'd like to share, now is your time to speak. Nick will hand you a microphone if you have something you'd like to share with us in terms of a joy, sorrow, and concern. So please feel free. If you have something, raise your hand.
Yeah, there's lots of good things about this. So I have one biological daughter, and she's just turned 38 in earlier October, and she's been looking for Mr. Right. And she'd given up about 2 years ago, and of course, there he comes. So they've known each other 2 years, and got engaged, this surprise engagement a couple of months ago. And I ask her on the phone now and then, so, any talk about wedding? And, oh, no, we just haven't had time. So she calls me Halloween Eve and says, well, thinking about getting married tomorrow. I listened. She said, well, we're just going to go down to the courthouse. We have a couple hours free in the morning. And we just thought it would be fun to have a Halloween anniversary. They both love dressing up in parties and all that. So I said, sounds great. She said, well, anything serious I need to think about before I actually get married? We talked about prenups and all that stuff, but it's too late for that, I think. So she said, all right, well, I'll let you know what happens. So I didn't hear anything all day Halloween. By the end of the day, I heard, well, we went to the courthouse and they couldn't really do it there. They needed a signature of an officiant. So we got to find somebody. But then we have a friend who is having a Halloween party, and he's taken that online certification, so he can do it. So I think that's what'll happen. So the next day, I waited to see whether it actually happened, and she said yes, it happened very well, and people brought flowers, people brought champagne, and it was just a fun time. So she's officially married on Halloween, and we'll have a fun anniversary. My anniversary was always New Year's Eve, so that was fun. So, yeah, and the great thing about it is I didn't have to pay a thing.
Could we please light a candle for all victims of gun violence and war?
Sally.
Good morning, everyone. I'm still a newcomer here, so thank you for welcoming us. And I have a joy and a sorrow. The joy is I get to spend time with my son this weekend. My wife and 2 daughters are off and away. My wife in California to visit her mom, who just underwent surgery for cancer. The good news is that they think they may have gotten it, but we won't know for a few more days. So it's a time of waiting, but also a good time to spend time with my son and enjoy this beautiful fall weather with all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I have a sorrow about a woman who attended our congregation over the last couple of years, Jacqueline Lewis. She passed away just this past week. She was under hospice care. So just keep her in your prayers.
Thank you, Dave. Sally, back here again, Dave.
This should have been my first joy to see all the friends here from Brevard. It's wonderful that you came.
And they didn't really come to spy on me. I know most of you know what my wife and I are doing right now. We're raising our 8-year-old grandson whose mother passed away back in July. And I really do appreciate all the thoughts, cards, phone calls, texts, or just thoughts. I really appreciate that. And I just want to let you know, we are struggling now with the father of this child who has a substance disorder, wants his son back now. And so we're having to go to court to get custody of the child. And I feel for the father because of his substance disorder, because I don't know what that's like. But often accompanying substance disorder are other behaviors that are difficult, and one of his is that he's violent. And so we spent the weekend away from home this weekend because he's in town, and we didn't feel safe. So he won't be there as of this afternoon. And like I said, I don't mean to sound like I'm passing judgment on him, because he's really struggled hard over the last 9 years since we've known him to overcome his addiction. But it's difficult, it's hard. And I think about all the people in our communities that are struggling with substance abuse and addiction. And it seems to me, I don't want to exaggerate it or sound alarms, but it seems pretty alarming now. But anyway, I thank you for your thoughts and your prayers, whatever. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share with us in terms of a joy or sorrow? Annie?
My daughter, I spoke with my daughter yesterday, and she was returned safely back to New Zealand. But my chief concern was of her 2 sons who were born and raised in Israel, and they both returned last month to be with their father, who does not live on a kibbutz. But anyway, one has returned to his new home in Australia, and the other son, the younger one, who had Army experience, has been given a job as a guard, and so he is staying there with his father. So all seems well with the family, but of course they are suffering a lot from the loss of their their school friends, and other friends during the big speech.
Let's share in a moment of silence, please.
Somos el barco, somos el mar, yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the Lord, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. The stream sings into the river sings into the sea. The sea sings into the boat that carries you and me. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the Lord, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. The boat we are sailing on was built by many hands. The sea we are sailing on, it touches every land. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. Voyage has been long and hard, and yet we're sailing still, with a song to help us hold together, if we only will. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. So with our hopes we raise the sails and face the winds once more, and with our hearts we chart the waters never sailed before. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. One more time. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me.
When I played in the rock and roll band, we'd say, don't clap, throw money.
Well, it is the office way.
Yes.
You're still saying that.
Now, if you would join with me again. Words are on the screen. To the work of this fellowship, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we call community. We dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Scallops. We love to eat them. They're shellfish that swim on the bottom of the ocean. We all know that, don't we? I want to say a few things about scallops. One of particular interest to me when I was reading about it in a biology book. Scallops have a lot of eyes, but they don't really see. And one of the things interesting about the scallops is they don't have a brain like we have. Is there a quote? Did I give that quote? Okay. But they see and then they react. They see and they react. So there's a straight line that goes from their eye straight to their motor system. Is that quote up there? This is a quote from that text I was reading about scallops. If we begin with a purely objective observation of this is the pilgrim scallop, we find it has a large number of eyes possessing a retina and lenses. However, the influences affecting those eyes do not connect up with one another. Every eye makes use of the general reflex apparatus, which is so set that it springs into action from the same excitation that comes to it from any direction. The excitation of a shadow followed by an optical excitation of movement is followed by a chemical excitation. When I read that line, I kept thinking of that song by the Beach Boys. I'm picking up good vibrations. He's giving me the excitations. Of course, we're talking about scallops. Hence, if we say of the higher animals that they use their eyes, we must say of the pilgrim scallop that the eyes use the animal. They serve to initiate the only free movement that the animal is capable of swimming. That line is what really grabbed me. That line that says, if we say of the higher animals they use their eyes, we must say of the pilgrim scallop that the eyes use the animal. What do y'all think of that? Does it remind you of anybody? That oftentimes we really don't use our eyes, they use us. And that oftentimes our responses to what we see are not really different from the scallops. Let me tell you a story of what happened a couple of years ago. Two white men saw a black man running through a white neighborhood, and their eyes told them that this was a dangerous man and they needed to track him down. And we all know what happened as a result of that. And to me, that is no different from the behavior of a scallop. You see something and you have a reflex action. You don't think about it. You just act. Before you even get there, you act. And so, that question of do we use our eyes or do they use us is a question I think that we all need to ask ourselves, Do we use our eyes or do they use us? In this notion of reflex, you know what the reflex is, this knee-jerk reaction. And I think we're seeing scallop-like behavior all around us today, unfortunately. And we're seeing that in the Middle East, tit for tat. You hit me, I'm going to hit you back. You kill us, we're going to kill you. And I know there's probably a lot, this what's going on there is really dividing our country a lot. I know there's lots, it's a complex issue, and I don't want to make it sound like it's simple. But what makes us human? I kept thinking about that question, what makes us human? And in the same text, not far down from this paragraph, the author, who by the way is a philosopher, who said humans have the capacity to turn their eyes around. We have the capacity to turn our eyes around. And, as many eyes as the scallop has, the scallop can't turn those eyes around. It just sees what's out there. Later on he talks about how the scallop sees these shadows, maybe a shark or a whale in the water, but it doesn't react. But when it sees its archenemy, the starfish, there's a stimulus that goes to the retina of the scallop, and that it's like a pulse of electricity. It goes straight from that eye to the visceral ganglion. Now, I don't really know what all that means. I know what visceral means. It's down here. And when I think visceral, I think of a gut punch. It's a gut punch. And when you get a gut punch, you tend to want to punch back. And so, the scallop doesn't have a developed mind like we have. And we have that developed mind because we were able at some point in our evolution to turn our eyes around. And we call it reflection. And here's how I see that. We can live like scallops, and there's a stimulus and there's a reaction. Stimulus, reflex action. But for us humans, we have the capacity to that stimulus and then to pause that, and in between that space to build our minds, to build a capacity to self-reflect and think about ourselves and to develop this mind. This same author of this book argues that we cannot account for human intelligence through evolution. It came through a mutation. And he believes this mutation occurred sometime around the Bronze Age. There was some kind of mutation. So you can't say humans are just higher functioning animals. Humans are just higher functioning scallops. He argues you can't do that. There was some kind of mutation in our evolution where we developed this capacity to think and to reflect. Now, there's arguments about that, that ability to see with our eyes and to see with the mind of the eye. According to the Genesis story, humans should not have been conscious. They stole it. Adam and Eve in the garden were no different from scallops. They had eyes, but they didn't see. And I told you the story, I think, at the picnic. Eve saw the apple, it was a delight to her eyes, then she ate it and her eyes were open. Well, that's just a mythological way of saying that we became conscious at that moment. And it should not have been. And some people still argue that. What have humans accomplished with their minds? Some people say it's not a good thing. And Carl Jung said, don't blame the unconscious for building the atomic bomb. It was the conscious mind that did that. So, it's kind of a double thing, We can use our minds to destroy. We can use our minds to hate and fear. We can use our minds and create compassion and love, mercy, justice. We can use our minds to call a halt to that electrical impulse that starts coursing through our body when we receive a stimulus from outside that says to us, first of all, punch back. We have this capability of saying, wait a minute, don't punch back. Like Martin Luther King said, violence only leads to violence. Perpetuating violence. But we have the capacity to stop that with our minds, to call a halt to that. And we call it self-restraint. We call it self-consciousness, self-awareness. The Greeks, did you know the Greeks created the middle voice, what's known as the middle voice? Jim is an English teacher, and he's probably going to correct me on this. The ancient Greeks, the term in Greece, ancient Greece for I see can either mean I see or I see something, either passive or active. Well, the Greeks created the middle voice that means I see myself. I think myself. I see for myself. And here's what Jacob Grimm says about that. The true middle voice was created by the ancient Greeks to designate a living action in the soul of the speaker. I love that. To designate a living action in the soul of the speaker. A living action in the soul of the speaker. To think about thinking. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Now, I love the ancient Greeks because they had a way of personifying their concepts. They didn't have these abstract concepts like we had. They personified them in the form of gods and goddesses. And the way they would say it is Apollo loves Sophrosyne. The god Apollo loves the goddess Sophrosyne. Does anybody know what Sophrosyne is? Well, I didn't either. I had to look it up. Sophrosyne is the goddess of self-restraint, of self-regulation, and self-control. And so what that myth is saying is the God of reason, the mind, loves the capacity to self-restraint, self-regulate. That's the way they're saying. To develop this mind that has a capacity to reflect. There is nothing, in my opinion, more beautiful than a sound, disciplined mind. Where do we get that? We get that from our educational systems. We get that from our teachers. We have to be taught that. But there's a part of your, I prefer not to call it your brain. I prefer to call it your mind because you're not born with it. Does anyone know what that function is? It's called the executive function. The only part, now this, you could argue with me on this because I've just read about this. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've read on Google, on the internet, that the executive function is the only part of your brain you're not born with it. You're born with all the other stuff, the limbic system and all that. But you're not born with the executive function. And what is the function of the executive function? It's Sophrosyne. It's the goddess. It's that function in your brain, your mind, that develops to help you put on the brakes, so to speak. You know, I was doing a little electrical wiring this past weekend, illegally, because you know, it's dangerous to do electrical wiring, right? In your house. I was trying to put up a security light, and I'd wire the security light, and I'd go down, flip the switch, and bam! Boom! Well, I'll try it again, you know? Wire the security light, go down, flip the switch, boom! And I finally was able to realize that it was a little teeny black wire in that security light that was the black wire that was open, and it was touching the metal on the. So I cut that off, rewired it, went back, flipped the switch, and guess what? It worked. And I keep thinking to myself, thank God for these circuit breakers. Or these, whatever you call them. Jim's electrician too. How many electricians in here? We have circuit breakers, right? Or surge, the other word I was Surge control?
It's
What?
a little different.
Okay, they're a little different. You know, that much I kept thinking, well, you know, we have this up here too. And that's the way the executive function is supposed to function. When that wave of electricity, when that current of electricity comes in the form of a stimulus, like you said something to me and I'm going to say something back to you, or I'm going to get revenge, or I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. When that surge comes in, we have a circuit breaker, and it's called the executive function. Regulates. The other way I think about that is, if you've ever read Plato's Republic, he said the best form of government is headed by a philosopher king, and I'm going to say queen. As the best form of government. He didn't have a whole lot of good things to say about democracy, by the way, but we won't get into that. He said the best form of government is a government by a philosopher king, a wise leader, someone who's wise. And, you know, he also said the government, the state of the government is really a macrocosm of the soul that the individual's living in it. It's, you know, the soul is a microcosm, am I saying that word? Microcosm of the state. The state is a macrocosm of the soul. And so I think, well, that's the way the executive function is supposed to be. It's our philosopher, wise king or queen that guides us, that keeps us in check. I also came across this Latin term, saper videre, S-A-P-E-R, saper videre, V-E-D-E-R-E. It said that when Leonardo da Vinci was asked what the secret of his artistic genius was, he responded simply with the words, saper videre, saper videre. Know how to see. Know how to see. Know how to see. Wayne Dyer says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. We see with our minds. I'm convinced more and more as I grow older that we don't live in the world, we live in our minds. We live in our minds. Our minds are everything. That's what Buddha said, the mind is everything. That this little thing that we have up here is really the controller and the guide through life. And you know, as I age, I'm 73 now, I'll soon be 74. And I don't know if you all have this experience, but I'm having it. That my body seems to be saying goodbye to me. You all know I had a heart attack a couple of weeks ago, right? That's never happened to me before. And by the way, I never took pills, and now I'm taking 7 pills a day. And that is hard to do. One of the pills I take is a blood thinner, and I got this little teeny scratch right there yesterday when I was picking persimmons, and I bled like a stuck paw or whatever they call it. But anyway, I don't like taking pills, but I'm taking 7 pills now. My next question for my heart doctor when I see him is, how do I get off these pills? And he's probably going to say, you can't. Okay, where was I going with that? Oh, okay. I realize the older I get, the more I'm having to live in my mind. You know, I'm having to realize my body is, you know, my body's just giving me certain messages about aging, and that I'm living in my mind. And I'll confess to you right now that I'm depressed. You know, my daughter died in a custody battle, and I'm struggling with depression. But I keep saying, you know, depression is not, the depression I'm struggling with is not chronic. You know, fortunately, it's not chronic. So my wife and I keep saying, you know, we'll get through this. We'll get through this. And we keep, you know, when your mind is built to reflect, which I think it is, it takes a lot of time to reflect. And you find a quiet place and you sit and reflect. Okay, I'm coming to an end now. There's another video that it was really bizarre, I thought, but it was put out by a Harvard professor. Imagine that. Well, you don't know what it's about yet. This is a quote from this, and you can watch it on video. A new deep sea study out of Harvard University found that sea scallops have evolved an unusually complex limbic system, which allows them to experience levels of emotions that far exceed that of humans. Now, most scientists say that scallops don't have a limbic system, but this guy's arguing that they do, the beginnings of the brain. And I say to myself, the point is whether or not the scallop has emotions that exceed those of humans. My question is not about scallops, but about humans. Is the scallop consciously aware that it has these feelings? Is the scallop aware of how powerfully these emotions can influence behavior? Has the scallop developed a language whereby it can talk and think about things? Can it think about thinking? Can it name the things in its environment? Can it recall them, reflect on them? Can it choose not to react to a stimulus? Can it choose not to react to an emotion or a passion? Can it channel its rage? Can it check its hatred? Can it sublimate its passions into poetry and art and music? Can it look into the past and remember the past? Can it look into the future and anticipate the future and maybe direct the future? I don't think it can. I think that's only what we humans can do. We are not scallops. We are human beings. We have this incredible thing up here we call the mind. I think it was Arthur Fletcher who said, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. We have this incredible mind. We can create beautiful symphonies or we can blow people up, But a lot depends on our teachers and our education and our community, We help each other, We help each other that way. So we're not scallops. We're humans. Thank you. Now I want us to end with a responsive reading. We usually begin with one, but I want us to end. I don't think you have this one. It's in your hymn book, and it's number 592. I want us to close with this reading. It's fairly long, but I think we can do it. Do you need a hymnal? You okay? 592, it's called The Free Mind. I love this. It's William Ellery Channing. I call that mind free which masters the senses, which recognizes its own reality and greatness. I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith.
Which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven.
I call that mind free which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse.
Which discovers everywhere radiant signatures of the infinite spirit, and in them finds out its own spiritual enlargement.
I call that mind free which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion.
Which refuses to be the slave or tool of
I call that mind free which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live in its own virtues. I call that mind free which sets no bounds to its love, which whenever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering.
Which recognizes the belonging to beings, the image of God, and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to all humankind.
I call that mind free which has cast off all fear but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall.
Which is calm in the midst of tumults, and possesses itself of all God's laws.
Thank you. Now we're going to sing Give Me That UU Religion to the tune of Give Me That Old Time Religion.
If anybody wants real words, if they have trouble seeing the screen, because they are tricky words. A little bit of a tongue twister. We heard last week from two of our members who came to UU from somewhere else. So we've included their names in here too. Yeah.
Now, we won't do this like we have in the revival.
Slow enough where you can say the words, but lively enough where you get some spirit. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. It's good enough for me. Helps me love everybody. Helps me love everybody. Helps me love and compassion. That's good enough for me. It teaches peace and justice, acceptance and unity, the democratic process. That's good enough for me. Chorus. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. It's good enough for me. It was good enough for Ernie, Susan, Bees, and Seeger, Charles Dickens, Hawthorne, Darwin. It's good enough for me. No, it was good enough and Barbara, Clara, Martin, Milton, Melville, Ben, Franklin, Thoreau, Newton. So it's good enough for me. Morris. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. It's good enough for me. Yeah. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. Give me that you religion. It's good enough for me.
Thank you. Let me close with these words, and then we will have, if anyone has any questions or comments or opposing viewpoints. Because of those who have gone before us, we are, in spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Thank you. Now, we have a extinguishing the flame of the chalice. And if you would join with me in the closing words after that. We extinguish the flame of the chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or opposing viewpoints? You can have opposing viewpoints, that's fine.
I was thinking about what you were saying about what our scientists are saying about the scallop and how this one theory is the scallops have higher level thinking. And being open to science and questioning science. I remember 60 years ago when I was a nurse's aide in high school in pediatrics ward, and we were constantly told by the nursing and the staff that the babies and the young children do not experience pain like we do as adults.
Wow.
And as a 15, 16-year-old, I kept questioning. Of course, you never question, you never bring up, that just doesn't make sense. So it just for years, it just bothered me so much that was for decades, forever, that they thought that this was the theory, that the infants and young children did not experience the pain. And just like a veterinarian might say, oh, your dog is overreacting. It's like with pain, overreacting. All these things that you question. So now, a scallop. I mean, I will definitely reflect on the next time I have scallops. I mean, I will pause and really give due respect to that scallop, because we just don't know. The mystery. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's true.
Nancy has something, and Jim. Nancy has something. Marty.
Well, I was just thinking about the eye itself. A couple things that came to mind. It makes me wonder. I have this thing in my right eye called an epiretinal membrane, and so I wanted it off of there. Okay, but the eye doctor said we can't do that. We'd rather not do that because the retina is connected directly to your brain, and that part of your brain that has a lot to do with executive function. So I thought about that for a while. I never got drunk or drank a lot of alcohol, so at least I didn't do that, and I didn't smoke. But now I've got this thing where I still can't fix my eye. It can't be fixed. And so we have to recognize that some things can't be fixed. And we have to learn to deal with them. So I deal with the fact that one eye is bigger than the other because that's the way it looks. And I realize that connection is kind of like the scallops. Have you ever seen a scallop run away? I think they do experience fear when they see those shadows. Because when they run away, they go like this when they're gone. It's very interesting to watch that. So maybe we're closer to scallops than we realize.
Jim already had something. Thank you, Nancy.
You gave me an opening, Ernie. You may regret that. For the last 9 years, I've been reading and speaking on ending the drug war, and I got into substance use disorder, addictions, and things like that. That led to the neurobiology of addiction. And most recently, actually last Thursday night, I gave almost an hour presentation on trauma, on emotional trauma. And I've done a lot of reading about that. And what Ernie was talking about fits right into that. And basically, it's our limbic system, which he mentioned, our amygdala, and the limbic system is the regulator of our emotions. That's where our emotions come from. And when we're in a fear mode or a stress mode, it shuts down the higher thinking, the prefrontal cortex, and the cortex, which is the executive function as you described it. And so what we see in the scallop is exactly what we see in our own brains. And our brains are designed for one thing, That's to keep us alive and healthy long enough to pass on our genes. That's what our brains are for. Everything else is extra. Our 3-pound brain is the most complex system ever discovered in the universe. And it contains, there's a little disagreement, somewhere between 86 and 100 billion neurons. And the connections between those number around 100 trillion. 100 trillion. And our limbic system, because it's designed to keep us safe and healthy, is set to the default mode of suspicion. And because through our evolution, we were competing, our little clan of 40 to 60 people was competing with other clans for very limited resources. So other humans were the most dangerous part of our environment, other than a tiger or something like that. And so our brain is set to default, and it's always comparing what we're seeing right this second to what we've seen in the past and deciding whether it's safe or not. Your brain's doing that right this second. And the default is suspicion. So when we see someone who is different, who doesn't fit the pattern that keeps us safe, makes us feel safe, we're immediately on guard. And so I've learned a lot about those kinds of things. And one more thing about the first 3 years of life, including the time in the womb. The brain develops during that time faster than at any other time in life. And basically, by the time you're 3 years old, depending on your experience with your primary caregivers, people closest to you, you have developed a view of the world and your basic personality by the time you're 3. And I'm reading an excellent book. By the way, I'd be glad to share the resources I've used for this with you if you're interested. Several books. And I'm reading one right now called Born to Love. And it's about the importance of empathy and how empathy is developed by the interaction between the baby and the caregiver. And a lot of it is about eye contact and touch and vocalization. So, interesting stuff, and Ernie, I'm glad you talked about that this morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have a, thank you, Jim, comment?
I've been reading a book by Jeanette Wells. She wrote The Glass Castle, and she's writing about her grandmother who grew up in the rough western part of Texas with her father who raised horses. And I'm going to lend you this book when I'm done. And it talks about, he said, you have to understand how a horse thinks. A horse is always afraid because it has to be on guard that like a bobcat or something isn't going to get it. And so it'll always run because that's the best thing you can do to get away from a bobcat. And so when you train a horse, you have to train it to trust you that you'll protect him so he won't run. So it's the same kind of concept.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to this congregation for loving Ernie. We've loved him through all these years, and he has meant so much to us in our Brevard church. And now to see him happy with you and interacting with you, and as he gives you love, to see you giving him love back, I just say thank you for that. You can't have him back.
The feeling's mutual. And this congregation is like the Brevard congregation.
Thank you for prepping him for us.
We did what we could.
I'm a good big head now. Anybody else have a comment? They will. David?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious at looking at this from an objective left brain perspective, it analyzes really well. But I've also been very familiar with the axiom that the heart rules the head. And how do you think that dynamic fits in this situation?
You've said it many times, the emotions get there before.
Right, yeah. I think modern neurologists today will say you cannot have a thought without an emotion attached to it somewhere, and this idea that there are pure thoughts without any emotions. When I believe that pretty much we're basically emotional beings, whatever that means. I don't think we understand anywhere near what the emotional life really is.
Right.
But I think the head and the heart are connected. If that answers your question, David, that there is no thought without some emotion. And we humans, I think, have developed the capacity to, once someone told me the difference between a feeling and emotion is an emotion is you felt this feeling and you know in your mind how you're feeling the emotion. It's a physical chemical thing. There's sometimes when, I don't know how I feel. It's weird. It's like, how am I feeling about this,
Right.
And I have to say to myself, what's the feeling? Is it fear? Is it rage? What am I feeling? And this is the first time in my life I've ever had to deal with this level of grief. To lose a child. And I feel like I'm in a foreign land. I feel so lost. I really do. Because I'm in this foreign land. And I'm dealing with these feelings, trying to bring them up into my head and recognize them, the feeling of grief. So I'm getting way off, I think, from your question, David. But
I think it's about objectification, that you're objectifying your feelings. You're trying to place them in a way that I can go through the outline in my left brain thinking, my objective analytical thinking, but you can't always fully objectify an emotion.
Okay, I agree. All right, anybody else? All right. I like what Joy said, next time you eat a scallop and you take that knife to it.